Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Paul Graney. Here are today's top stories. President Trump's impeachment trial kicks off in the Senate. The Senate Majority Leader opened the session with a set of revised rules for the trial. The U.S. reporting its first case of the deadly coronavirus from China. The new virus has now killed 6 in China and infected hundreds of people across Asia. President Trump meets with the new president of the European Commission. He said they're working towards what he's calling a big trade deal. Mexico begins sending migrants back to Honduras. This after a scuffle at the Guatemala-Mexico border between migrants and security forces. And the Saw Lady sheds light on a rare and unique art form, the musical or singing carpenter's saw. Today marks the start of the Senate's impeachment trial of President Trump. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell revised some of the rules, but the chamber is still undecided on whether to allow new witness testimony.
President Trump's Senate impeachment trial kicked off Tuesday morning.
We began just the third presidential impeachment trial in American history.
McConnell opened the chamber and began by promising a fair, even-handed process. He presented a revised set of rules for the trial and warned that the Senate would stay in session until it was adopted. Initially, the House impeachment managers and the president's legal team would have 2 days to make their opening arguments. But the new guidelines give each side 3 days each and a total of 24 hours.
Senators will be able to seek further information by posing written questions to either side through the Chief Justice.
Likewise, House evidence will now be admitted, no vote necessary, unless the president's team files a motion to throw out evidence. Debate over whether or not to allow witnesses is expected to continue. The trial is expected to continue for 2 to 8 weeks.
As the trial kicks off, senators are still in the midst of a bipartisan conflict over how the trial should proceed. Republicans say the Senate will not redo the House's investigation, and Democrats accuse the Senate Majority Leader of rushing the trial.
As the Senate gets ready to begin the impeachment trial of President Donald Trump, there's still a fight over how it will proceed.
This is clearly an attempt to rig the trial.
Democrats accusing Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of rushing the process and attempting to cover up President Trump's alleged wrongdoing.
It appears that Leader McConnell decided to go along with the president's desire to cover up his wrongdoing.
And Republicans arguing the Senate process will be fair.
The Senate's fair process will draw a sharp contrast with the unfair and precedent-breaking inquiry that was carried on by the House of Representatives.
But reaffirming the Senate will not reinvestigate the president.
The House chose not to pursue the same witnesses they apparently would now like the Senate to pre-commit to pursuing ourselves. As I've been saying for weeks, nobody will dictate Senate procedure to United States senators.
This begins just the third presidential impeachment trial in U.S. history.
The U.S. today confirmed its first case of an infection called the coronavirus. It's been spreading in Asia, where it's killed 6 in China and sickened hundreds.
The first case of the deadly SARS virus is diagnosed in the United States. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, announced Tuesday that a Washington state resident is infected with the coronavirus. The new virus was first detected in the Chinese city of Wuhan weeks ago and has now spread to South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and Thailand. In a press conference call, CDC said the American man traveled from Wuhan back to the U.S. last Wednesday, entered the U.S. without any symptoms but fell ill days after. The CDC says the person is now healthy but remains isolated. It says he poses very little risk to the staff or the general public, but concerns remain.
This is an evolving situation, and again, we do expect additional cases in the United States and globally.
Official data from China shows over 300 people in the country have been infected, but some experts from Hong Kong and UK says the actual number could be over 1,000. On China's social media, netizens accuse the authorities of covering up the outbreak, which would lead to further spreading of the virus. The World Health Organization says the virus can pass from human to human, but it's unknown yet how contagious it is. The CDC has increased its travel warning for Wuhan, China from level 1 to level 2. Travelers are advised to practice enhanced precautions. 2 more U.S. airports will start screening passengers from Wuhan, Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, and Chicago's O'Hare Airport. JFK in New York, LA Airport, and San Francisco Airport started screening last Friday. In a previous interview with NTD, Dr. Michael M.C. Lai, a leading coronavirus expert in fighting SARS in 2003 in Taiwan, said isolation is important. He said wearing a mask, washing your hands, and checking your body temperatures daily are all key steps in preventing the spread of the virus. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Stocks fell back today on news that the coronavirus had reached the U.S. Wall Street lost ground on Tuesday, backing away from record highs as the viral outbreak from China found its way to U.S. shores. The Dow Jones fell 0.52%, the S&P 500 lost 0.26%, and the Nasdaq dropped 0.19%. Airline stocks also tumbled amid fears the disease could impact global air travel. And in Switzerland, President Trump meets with the new president of the European Commission today. This on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos. He said they would discuss what he's calling a big trade deal.
President Trump had his first meeting with the new president of the European Commission on Tuesday in a high-profile summit in the alpine town of Davos, Switzerland.
It's great to be with the president of the European Commission and a woman who's highly respected, I have to say, and I hear a very tough negotiator, which is bad news for us because we're going to talk about a big trade deal, and we've been talking about it for a while, and hopefully we can get something done.
Von der Leyen praised the long history and friendship between Europe and the United States.
The American people and the European people are good friends, and this is what we're going to build on. And indeed, we have issues to discuss, and we will negotiate, but I'm looking forward to this relationship.
Now, the U.S. has an interim trade agreement with China and a trade deal with Mexico and Canada that has passed Congress. More eyes are turning to its trade relationship with the EU, where there's ongoing tension over issues including digital and auto import taxes. U.S. trade with the EU totaled nearly $1.3 trillion in 2018, with a $109 billion deficit. President Trump complained the relationship is unbalanced and unfair. One example being the EU charging a 10% tariff on U.S. car imports, while the U.S. charges only 2.5% on their cars. Last October, the U.S. imposed tariffs on $7.5 billion worth of EU goods over Europe's subsidies for aircraft maker Airbus. Washington also imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum from the EU. EU-U.S. trade talks have made little progress over the past year. On Monday at Davos, President Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron agreed to a truce for this year, where the U.S. will hold off tariffs on French goods, and France will suspend its 3% levy on big tech companies, most of them from the U.S. Italy and the U.K. have similar taxes about to take effect.
And moving to the UK, a new tax dubbed by some as the Google tax is looming. A similar tax imposed in France has already caused tensions with Washington. NTD's Jane Worrell in London has more.
The UK has plans to tax sales made by US tech giants like Amazon, Google and Facebook. France has already imposed similar legislation, but it's resulted in Washington threatening to slap $2.4 billion of tariffs on French goods.
I don't want France taxing American companies. If they're going to be taxed, it's going to be the United States will tax them. Okay?
On Monday, the French finance minister offered to delay payments to resolve the spat, but admitted it's one of the most difficult negotiations he has led. It's not an issue that will be going away anytime soon. A couple of years ago, the European Commission proposed a 3% tax on digital companies that had revenues of over $830 million per year. Some smaller EU member states are opposed to the tax, but other countries have started their own legislation to get the ball rolling.
And they all say that once there is a global agreement about this, they will abandon their own legislations.
The tax is not yet enshrined in UK law. Boris Johnson might be thinking twice about implementing it. As the UK becomes an independent player in the world, he has a US trade deal to negotiate with President Trump.
And it may be that this new government, who wants to get a trade deal with the US, they may back down.
And whether the tax will make things fairer is another matter. In an interview with the Financial Times last week, the UK's country manager for Amazon said that the cost could be passed on to its sellers, which means that the smaller businesses could be the ones taking the biggest hit. Amazon and Facebook declined to comment, and Google didn't respond to NTD's request for comment by the deadline. Leaders and business people at the World Economic Forum in Davos have digital tax to discuss on their agenda this week. Jane Wirrell, NTD News, London.
And during his opening speech at the World Economic Forum, President Trump said the U.S. will join the 1 Trillion Trees initiative. It's an ambitious plan aimed at restoring and planting 1 trillion trees by 2030.
President Trump, in an effort to preserve what he called the majesty of God's creation, announced that the U.S. would join a massive and ambitious tree planting project.
Today, I'm pleased to announce the United States will join 1 Trillion Trees initiative being launched here at the World Economic Forum. 1 trillion trees.
Launched at the forum, the initiative is set to plant 1 trillion trees by 2030 to meet what it considers a safe limit on climate change. However, the president warned of alarmists who've used the environment to restrain the possibilities of the future.
They predicted an overpopulation crisis in the 1960s, mass starvation in the 70s, and an end of oil in the 1990s. These alarmists always demand the same thing: absolute power to dominate, transform, and control every aspect of our lives.
This year's conference was sustainability themed, but there was a stark difference of what that meant between Trump and climate activist Greta Thunberg. She said planting trees wasn't enough and called on all event participants from companies, banks, and governments to
halt all investments in fossil fuel exploration and extraction, immediately end all fossil fuel subsidies, and immediately and completely divest from fossil fuels.
The young activist also criticized the U.S. for leaving the Paris Accord, a pact between nations to tackle climate change. Trump has said he withdrew to protect American workers who would be unnecessarily burdened by the accord. He did, however, say on Tuesday that he's a big believer in the environment and that the U.S. will continue to better manage its trees and forests.
According to a State Department official, the Trump administration plans to move forward with a new rule aimed at stopping what it calls birth tourism.
The practice allows foreign nationals to give birth on U.S. soil to ensure their children become American citizens. A State Department official said the department is amending temporary visas to the U.S. to ensure it does not include birth tourism. The expected move comes a week after a Hong Kong-based airline apologized for demanding a passenger take a test to prove she was not pregnant before boarding a flight. The passenger was headed to the U.S. Pacific island of Saipan, which has emerged as a favorite destination for birth tourism. The airline said in a statement that it was under pressure from authorities in Saipan to step up checks on passengers. It's not immediately clear whether the incident was related to the U.S. regulatory change.
The Mexican government began sending migrants back to Honduras today. This after hundreds waded across a river into Mexico, hoping to eventually reach the U.S.
Mexican authorities issued a statement on Tuesday assuring that they will return approximately 500 Hondurans for not complying with immigration requirements. Thousands had set out from Honduras last week in hopes Mexico would allow them passage.
I know it's risky, but it's more risky to remain in Honduras. We hope they open up and have some mercy.
Scores of migrants have been arriving at the Mexican border in recent days, with the bulk of them still advancing in a larger caravan, bearing similarities to a caravan that tried to force its way through the same crossing in October 2018. Now, Mexico is being tested on how it complies with U.S. demands to contain migrant flows. That's after President Trump threatened tariffs on Mexico and other Central American countries if they allow large groups to reach the U.S. border. Mexico's president said he is monitoring the approach of the migrants and has held out the prospect of jobs for those who want to stay. The Guatemalan government issued new data on Monday showing that 4,000 migrants crossed into that country last week. So far, 400 have been deported from Guatemala.
And coming up, the Supreme Court rejects a request by Democrats to speed up a court case. The court is reviewing a case about Obamacare, but it says it will take as long as it takes.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Our investigative reporters at the Epoch Times have spent 18 months uncovering the biggest political scandal in modern history. We connected the dots around Spygate, the actions by Obama-era officials against Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Join me on Declassified as we bring you up-to-date developments on this unfolding scandal.
The Supreme Court rejected a request by House Democrats in 20 Democrat-led states to fast-track a review of cases that could dismantle Obamacare.
The Supreme Court refuses to fast-track an appeal by parties wanting justices to review a case that shoots down the Affordable Care Act. The appeal was requested by House Democrats in 20 Democrat-led states. They were hoping to get a ruling by the end of June, but the busy Supreme Court may not get to it until after the 2020 presidential election. After earlier lawsuits and appeals, lower courts are in the process of determining the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. The Trump administration would rather they finish that process before the Supreme Court steps in. The lower courts already struck down the individual mandate part of the act. That portion requires an individual to buy health insurance or pay a tax penalty. Plaintiffs also seek to strike down the entire Affordable Care Act by claiming it's inseparable from the individual mandate. The Democrats want to challenge the ruling on the individual mandate. They say expediting the decision is a necessity for millions of Americans who have purchased coverage under Obamacare.
The FBI has just shut down a website that may have been selling your private information. The site WeLinkInfo sold stolen personal data from over 10,000 data breaches, including usernames and passwords. Before the FBI seized and blocked the WeLinkInfo site, it was a treasure trove for cybercriminals. The site allowed anyone to look up a person's email address to find passwords, usernames, phone numbers, and other info on that person. The site's huge database contained 12 billion records from over 10,000 data breaches, including data from LinkedIn and MyFitnessPal breaches. The data wasn't only available to sophisticated cyber criminals, it could be accessed by anyone for as little as $2 per day. Two 22-year-olds have been arrested in connection with the case, one in Germany and the other in Northern Ireland. Police said that they found equipment used to run the site at the arrest site in Germany. Northern Irish police say they had been investigating since August 2019. The site claimed its services were a legitimate way for people to check if their personal data was already stolen and publicly available. And coming up next, a new study says people on low-carb diets need to pay attention to a key factor, and that carbs aren't the only concern.
Special for us.
Bring your family, let your children experience this.
I know my daughter just loves it. When the curtain first opened, I looked out at her face and she was amazed by what she saw.
It's great for the whole family.
And I have a granddaughter. I want her to see something like this because it'll probably enrich her soul and her development as a person. It would change her life.
It's hard for kids to listen to parents all the time, but when they hear it from an outside influence as well, reinforcing your values, that's great.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And her birthday was Friday, so we surprised her with tickets.
I was just so amazed. They're amazing, amazing dancers.
The girls are so elegant and beautiful, and the colors are amazing.
It's just amazing. It's truly breathtaking. Just the story. There's a story behind everything as well, which is amazing. There's so much culture
It's a bridge between meditation and peace and where we are now in our busy lives.
As an adult and a teacher, it's awesome to see kids reacting and having that positive reaction to the show.
I will see it next year and year after that and the year after that. It is just incredible, absolutely beautiful.
I wish I could see it again, like right now.
A new study indicates the health benefits of a low-carb or low-fat diet may depend on the quality of the food you're eating. Researchers analyzed data from over 37,000 adults. They found low-carb and low-fat diets based on plant proteins and fats brought health benefits, unlike diets based on animal proteins and fats. The data suggests dieters should avoid red and processed meat and focus instead on high-quality plant proteins, unsaturated fats, whole grains, low-starch vegetables, whole fruits and nuts. The study was published today in the medical journal JAMA Internal Medicine. And the Michelin Guide is expected to be released next week, but some restaurants already know what the rating will be. French flagship restaurant Bocuse learned it will lose one of its 3 stars. This just 2 years after the death of its founding chef. Our France correspondent David Vives has the story.
For French chef Pascal Barbeau, gastronomy requires a lot of discipline and effort in the search for the perfect taste. He practices his skills in his restaurant Astrance at the foot of the Eiffel Tower.
You have to smash the truffle to make the aromas explode, then mount it with butter. So here we are, croque monsieur assorted with truffle, the perfect croque monsieur for me.
As with all French chefs, he's waiting for the 2020 Michelin Guide to be released next week. The guide gives out awards to chefs on a 1 to 3 star scale. Chefs can be given a star or have one removed. But some restaurants already know their results, like the flagship restaurant of celebrated French chef Paul Bocuse, which has lost its coveted Michelin 3-star rating for the first time in over 5 decades. Following the death of the French chef nearly 2 years ago, this lost star saddened the Bocuse family. Bocuse's son Jérôme said to the media he was upset. Some chefs are very upset by losing a star, like Bernard Loiseau, a chef who committed suicide in 2003 after losing a star. Or more recently, Marc Veyrat, who lost a court case against Michelin, which he filed after discovering he had lost a star. Since founding his restaurant 20 years ago, Barbeau has held 3 stars. Each star each year came as a surprise. But like the Bocuse family, he lost 1 star last year.
I feel sorry for the Bocuse family, for the restaurant staff. Having a star is very encouraging. It means you're in a good way, and losing a star is never a pleasant moment. We have got to get up from where you fall and stand strong.
For him, quality is always the ultimate objective of a chef.
A chef cooks for his guests. There are so many different gastronomy critics, and some focus on new chefs, some focus on traditional cuisine. Who will you be cooking for? As a cook, you need to work to the best of your ability, and you are serving the guests.
The Michelin Guide will be released on January 27th. Reporting by David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And after the break, we'll listen to some unique music from New York's Soul Lady. She spent 2 decades playing music on a carpenter's handsaw to audiences around the world. Find out more when we return.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and bite-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Instead of thinking about what he could get for his birthday, a 5-year-old boy in Illinois thought about what he could give. He started helping kids in his own unique way. Tyler Slizz has collected 125 pieces of bedding, blankets, pillows and sheets for a group called Sleep in Heavenly Peace. The organization builds, assembles and delivers beds to children in need. Tyler's contribution started with a video to guests for his birthday party in October. He asked for pieces of bedding to donate instead of presents. Bedding donations and checks continue to stream in. And believe it or not, the carpenter's handsaw can actually be used as a musical instrument. NTD's Kevin Hogan meets New York's saw lady.
Natalia has been playing the musical saw for more than 20 years. She wants to introduce this unique art form to more people.
I would like to get it to be more known and more mainstream.
One thing that sparked her interest in the saw is that it makes wave-like shapes when you play it.
Playing a saw is already a very visual art form.
Before learning to play the saw, she was a very committed dancer, but one moment, everything changed.
I was hit by a car, and that was basically the end of my dance life.
She didn't know what to do with herself after losing her ability to dance.
My parents wanted to just cheer me up, and so they took me on a trip to Europe.
During a trip to Austria, inspired by the movie The Sound of Music, she witnessed someone playing the saw for the first time.
There it was, right in front of me, and I was mesmerized.
She went backstage to ask the musician if he could teach her how to play the saw, but he declined.
He said, "Go home, imitate what you remember me doing, and figure it out."
That is the traditional way that saw players first learn the instrument.
If you succeed, it's a sign that you're meant to be a saw player. If you don't succeed, forget about it. It's not for you.
Her trip to Europe changed her life.
What I've learned from this experience is to go outside. Give stuff the chance to come to me.
Her friend sees Natalia as a kind and humble person who has given the world a gift of her beautiful music.
That's what I like the most about her. It's just how much she cares about the legacy of that instrument, the legacy of the church, the legacy of the community.
At the time, she didn't think she was ready, but she challenged herself to perform for a senior citizens group anyway.
It was like a 45-minute long performance, and they loved it.
Her success sparked her confidence, and she began performing more and more.
If you bring joy to others, in return, you get joy from them. It just happens.
Natalia has performed with the Westchester Philharmonic Orchestra as well as the Manhattan Chamber Orchestra, just to name a few. She now hopes to open a saw museum with the Astoria Historical Society in New York City. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Paul Graney.